L'chaim toivim u'leshalom. To life, may it be a good life. May it be a life of peace. A good Shabbos, my holy sisters and brothers, or should we say a good and Erev Shabbos. Shabbos is coming later this evening, but it's great to be with you now. Let's light up the darkness. Who is with us on a Friday afternoon? Renee in Indiana, Yehuda in South Carolina, Pauline in Chicagoland, Stephen in New Hampshire, Karen in Northern California, Nancy, Sharon in New Jersey, Michael in Indiana, Michael says Shabbat Shalom, Tom in PA, Christo in Lubbock, Texas, Maureen in Michigan, Ira in Greenville, South Carolina, Bella in Florida, Harry Weiss, my good friend back in Staten Island, I assume. Good to see you, Chaim. Renee says, good Shabbos. Molly Litvak saying, good Shabbos from New York City. That's our daughter. That's awesome, Molly. So glad you're learning with us. Christos says, L'chaim. Barbara, you don't subscribe or unsubscribe on Facebook. You could just unfollow the page. Pauline is given... Wait, say that again. My conversion will be this evening at the Shabbat service at Makom Soleh Lakeside Congregation in Highland Park. And my chosen Hebrew name is Hadassah Ruth. Mazel Tov, and Baruch Haba. Welcome to the family, Pauline. Where was I? Nash is in California. Mona says Shabbat Shalom from Canada. Oh, Chaim, you're still here. Thank God. That's great that you're here. Molly says so good to be here. And over on the YouTube side, Aoife checking in from Florida, and Faith in Oregon. Welcome, everybody. Have you heard the shofar today? It's Elul. I believe it's 17 days to go till Rosh Hashanah. Wake up. It's part of Lecha Dodi also that we sing tonight. Uri, Uri. Wake up. All right, my friends. Today we are finishing chapter 5 with God's help here in Tractate Kesubos, the 15th volume of the Talmud, the laws of marital contracts. We're completing our discussion of Mishnah number 7. This is Daf Samech Hey, page 65 here in Tractate Kesubos. And with that, we'll actually finish volume 1 in the Koren Talmud of Tractate Kesubos. In the Art Scroll, Kesubos is 3 volumes. In the Koren here, it's 2. So we're about halfway through this tractate. This final Mishnah that we read yesterday is talking about a husband's obligations to his wife for actual physical sustenance. What kind of food, how much food must he provide for her? How often does he need to provide new clothing for her and new shoes? And we continue that discussion today. We picked it up at the bottom of 64b. The Mishnah, our Mishnah, teaches that Rabbi Yosei said, only Rabbi Yishmael, who was near Edom, allotted her barley, right? So we saw that there was discussion yesterday about how much wheat husband has to provide to his wife so that she can make bread, so that she has enough for proper meals, right? In Judaism, a meal is not a meal unless it actually has bread in it, so that you would make the motzi blessing over the bread of the earth. You can eat a lot of food. Obviously, you can have a filling repast, as it were. But for it to be a proper meal, it has to include bread in it. So one of the allowances that a husband must provide for his wife is enough wheat in the form of flour so that she can have, and then yesterday they debated 14 meals a week, 16 meals a week, 18 meals a week. And that was yesterday's discussion. But in the Mishnah, it said you could also provide it in barley. But barley was understood to be a lower grade of flour, lower grade bread, kind of like a poor man's bread. And that's actually why, for instance, when we count the Omer, counting the days from the second night of Passover all the way to Shavuos, there's a barley offering that's brought on the second day of Passover, and there are loaves of wheat bread, wheat-based bread that are brought on Shavuos. And so these 50 days that we count, it's a kind of refinement of the soul that goes on during those 7 weeks as we sort of progress from animal food to human food, from giving into our more base desires and elevating to more spiritual desires. But at any rate, a husband could provide sort of the equivalent value of wheat flour in barley flour, but it is preferable that he gives wheat flour. So Rabbi Yosef says, well, Rabbi Yishmael would give barley, but only because he lived in the region of Edom. So the Gemara asks, but does this indicate that it is only in Edom that they eat barley, whereas in the rest of the world they do not eat barley? This cannot be the case, as barley was eaten by poor people everywhere. So the Gemara explains, this is what Rabbi Yosef is saying, only Rabbi Yishmael, who was near Edom, allotted her, his wife, a double amount of barley to that of wheat, since Edomite barley is bad. Whereas elsewhere, the barley is of a higher quality, and therefore the difference between barley and wheat is less marked. The Mishnah further taught, and he, the husband, must give her half a kav of legumes, as well as oil and fruit. So the Gemara comments, and yet wine is not taught in the Mishnah, right? There's no specific allowance made that the husband must provide wine for his wife. So doesn't a husband have an obligation to provide wine for his wife? Let us examine. And yet wine is not taught in the Mishnah. And this supports the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. As Rabbi Elazar said, wines are not allotted to a wife. And if you say, now we're on 65a, and if you say that in the verse from Hosea, chapter 2, verse 7, I will go after my lovers who give me my bread and my water, my wool and my flax, my oil and my lover. So the word drink, shikuyai, is apparently a reference to wine, which indicates that it is usual for a woman to receive wine. And if you would think that, you'd be wrong. This is invalid, since the term shikuyai is not referring to wine, but rather to items that a woman desires, mishtokeket. And what are these? Jewelry or other ornaments, but not wine. Well, Rabbi Yehuda of the village of Neberaya, and some say of the village of Nefor Chayil, interpreted a verse. From where is it derived that one does not allot wines for a woman? As it is stated, 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 9, so Hannah rose up after she had eaten in Shiloh, so Hannah rose up after she had eaten in Shiloh and after he had drunk. Right? So in English, drink, drunk, drank does not have male and feminine, right? Other languages do. Hebrew certainly does. So if a man is drinking, that's a slightly different verb than if a woman is drinking, right? The syntax of the verb is a little different. So we know that it says that Hannah rose up after she had eaten in Shiloh and after he had drunk. So it states he had drunk and not she had drunk. You might think it would have said, so she rose up after she ate and drank in Shiloh. But since it says she rose up after she ate in Shiloh and he drank, what could that mean? It must mean that although she ate in Shiloh, she didn't do any of the drinking, only her husband had a drink in Shiloh. So the Gemara asks, well, however, if that is so, by the same reasoning, should the phrase she had eaten, which is in the feminine, indeed be interpreted to mean that only she ate and he did not eat? I mean, what happened here? There was a meal and the wife ate food and the husband drank alcohol, but she had no wine and he had no food? Makes no sense. Right? Indeed. So if that is so, by the same reasoning, she had eaten, indeed should be interpreted to mean only she ate and he did not eat? That's silly. So the Gemara answers, we say this interpretation from the fact that meaning that she did not have wine, we say that from the fact that the verse was already dealing with her. If she had drunk wine, said she arose after she ate and drank. Now that it changed from she ate to he drank, the verse must have had a reason for making that change. One can learn from this that he had drunk means that they ate, but only he drank. So the Gemara raises an objection from a Baraisa. If a woman is accustomed to wine, she is given wine. Now you've said that a husband doesn't have to provide his wife wine, but we have a Baraisa, contemporaneous teaching with the Mishna, which says if a woman is accustomed to wine, she is given wine. So the Gemara explains, if the woman is accustomed to wine, it is different. As Rav Chanana bar Kahana said, that Shmuel said, if a woman is accustomed to drinking wine, she is given 1 cup. And if she is not accustomed to wine, she is given 2 cups. What? That doesn't make any sense. We've all met people who just, have no experience drinking alcohol, or alcohol is not really good for them. So they would drink less, not more. You don't give an inexperienced drinker more than you would give to somebody who's accustomed to drinking. What does this mean? And in fact, the Gemara says that's not what it means. What is Shmuel saying? His statement is the opposite of what one would logically expect. So Abaye said, this is what Shmuel is saying. If she is accustomed to wine, then in the presence of her husband, she is given 2 cups of wine. And if she is not in the presence of her husband, she is given 1 cup. If she is not accustomed to drinking wine, then in the presence of her husband, she is given only 1 cup. And if she is not in the presence of her husband, she is not given wine at all. So Shmuel must have been talking in very much shorthand. Right? If she's accustomed, 1 cup. If she's not accustomed, 2 cups. And from that, we're to understand that, no. If she's accustomed, then when she's with her husband, she can have 2 cups. When she's not with her husband, 1 cup. If she's not accustomed to drinking wine, then when she's with her husband, 1 cup. And when she's not with her husband, no cups. And if you wish, say instead, if she is accustomed to wine, she is given wine, but not for drinking. Rather, for meat pudding, tzike, which is made with wine, flour, and leftover meat in a pot. Interesting. So meat pudding sounds a little bit like a cholent. And it's made in a pot. It's kind of like you have meat and then you turn it into a stew, as it were. And this requires wine. So she's given wine for that if she's accustomed to wine. But it's not for drinking. And Rabbi Abahu said that Rabbi Yochanan said an incident occurred. All right, let's get to the real world. Involving the daughter-in-law of Nakdimon ben Gurion, whose husband had died. So the sages, this is where it really matters. What is the allotment apportioned to a wife when she becomes a widow? Now the court is stepping in to manage the estate, as it were, on behalf of the heirs, right? The heirs are going to, right, the sons are going to inherit, but the court will say that you have to provide for your mother. And it might not be their mother, right? They may be the sons of this man by another wife, and they still have this obligation to take care of their father's widow. So among the things that she gets is sustenance, right? All the foods that we mentioned in yesterday's discussion. And now this question, is she allotted wine from the estate of her husband when she's a widow, right? So in this incident involving the daughter-in-law of Nakdimon ben Gurion, the sages apportioned for her from his estate 2 sa of wine, sa, right, that's a measure, of wine for pudding, but, two sa of wine for pudding, for making this stew, from one Shabbos Eve to another, meaning every week. So she said to them, as a blessing out of gratitude. She said to them, so may you apportion for your own daughters an amount as large as this. And it was taught she was a widow waiting for her yavam, right? She died her husband died childless. So that's another question about the heirs. I guess it would be his brother. So her husband did not have a child, so now she's the widow and he had a brother. So right, this is a yibum situation. She's awaiting her yavam. Either they're going to perform chalitza or they're going to get married, and their first child will be an heir of the brother who died. So she's saying to the sages who've now apportioned to her a large amount of wine that she can use for the pudding, and she says to them, thank you, and so may you apportion for your own daughters an amount as large as this. It was taught she was a widow waiting for her yavam, and consequently, the sages did not answer amen after her blessing, as they did not want their daughters to reach her unfortunate state, to be a young widow. It was taught in a baraisa, 1 cup of wine is good for a woman. 2 cups is a disgrace, as she will start to become drunk. After 3 cups, she will become lustful and verbally request sexual intercourse, which is unseemly. After 4 cups of wine, she will even request intercourse from a donkey in the marketplace, as at this stage she is so drunk that she is not particular about with whom she has relations. And Rava said they taught that a woman should not drink much wine only if her husband is not with her. However, if her husband is with her, we have no problem with it. If she feels an urge for intercourse, her husband is available. It should be noted that when we talk about cups of wine in the Talmud, it's a little bit different than how we think of wine today. Then they were talking about old wine, aged wine, which is very, very strong and which would need to be diluted 4-to-1 with water. If it wasn't properly diluted, it could be a very strong drink indeed. Now, the Gemara raises a difficulty, but the case of Hannah was one in which her husband was with her, and yet this episode is cited as a source for the law that a woman should not drink wine. And the Gemara answers, the case of a guest is different. As Rav Huna said, from where is it derived that a guest is prohibited from engaging in conjugal relations? As it is stated, and they rose up in the morning early, and they worshipped before the Lord, and returned and came to their house to Ramah, and Elkanah knew Hannah, his wife, and the Lord remembered her. Right? This was the incident of Hannah, who was, Elkanah had 2 wives. His favorite wife was Hannah, even though she was barren. Hannah felt aggrieved because the other wife, I think Penina, had a bunch of children. And so Hannah went up, to the house of the Lord, right? The Mishkan was at that time, where the high priest was, I think, Elimelech, right? I think it was Elimelech, Eli something. Somebody will put in the comments for me. And was praying, just pouring out her heart before God. And the high priest thought she was drunk, and scolded her for drinking and coming into the presence of the Lord. And she said, I am not drunk, I'm brokenhearted, and I'm praying for a son. And he said, and he basically apologized and said, may your prayer be granted. And it was. And her son became the great prophet Samuel. So these are the people that we're talking about, Samuel's parents. And so what happened? So after he told her, your prayer, Eli, okay, so maybe just Eli. So he said to her, your prayer will be answered. Okay, you're going to have a son. So, having this great blessing from the high priest, you might have thought that they would go back to the house where they were staying. I think in Shiloh is where the Mishkan was at that time. But they would go to this place, right, that's where it was. And so they would just go back to their lodging house, their B&B, as it were, and make love, right? Because now there's a child, that they're going to be blessed with a child. But they don't. They wait until they get back home. And from this we learn out that guests in someone's house should not be making love while they are guests. So the Gemara relates, Abaye's wife, Choma, came before Rava, and Abaye died, as Rava was the local judge. She said to him, right, so Abaye died, right? Abaye and Rava were colleagues who had many, many disputes recorded in the Talmud, debates, let's say. But Abaye died before Rava. So his wife Choma came before Rava, right, her husband's colleague, but now acting as the local judge. And she said to him, apportion sustenance for me, as I am entitled to be sustained by Abaye's heirs. So Rava apportioned sustenance for her. And then she said, apportion wine for me as well. And Rava said to her, I know that Nachmani, which is a nickname for Abaye, I know that Abaye did not drink wine. Since you were not accustomed to drinking wine during your husband's lifetime, you are not entitled to it after his death. She said to him, by the master's life, this is false. In fact, he, Abaye, would give me wine to drink in cups as large as this. And she sort of held up her hands in a gesture to show how large the cups were with which her husband, Abaye, portioned wine to her while he was alive. And while she was showing him the size of the cups, because her arms went up like this, her arm became uncovered, right? The sleeve kind of came down. She was a very modest woman, but now you could see the skin of her arm. And she was so beautiful that it was as though a light had shined in the courtroom, right? The skin of her arm, just revealed some of her beauty in the courtroom, and it was like the whole courtroom became a light, right, with her beauty. What happened to Rava? Rava arose, he went home, and he requested intercourse from his own wife, the daughter of Rav Chisda. Now the daughter of Rav Chisda said to him, who was just now in the courtroom? Noticing his unusual behavior, she suspected that there must have been a woman in the court. And he said to her, Choma, Abaye's wife, was in the courtroom. Upon hearing this, Rava's wife went after Choma and struck her with the lock of a chest until she drove her out of the entire city of Mechoza, saying to her, you have already killed 3 men, as Abaye was her third husband. And she also said, right, the wife of Rava's wife also said to Abaye's widow, you have already killed 3 men, and now you come to kill another one, my husband Rava? Since you showed him your beauty, he will want to marry you. Be gone. Very, very harsh. I mean, wow. But she left. Now, this idea that a widow of 3 husbands, yes, I mean, we have that teaching elsewhere, that if a woman buries 3 husbands, then that establishes a chazaka, right? Some kind of a pattern that tragically she's somehow bad luck, and so a man should not marry this woman who has buried 3 husbands. Now, we also had exceptions to that rule. We saw that if any of those husbands died, in sort of like an event that killed a lot of people, like there was a plague, there was, marauding armies, something like that, well, then it's not her fault. But, if it's something that seems a little bit out of the ordinary and that she has 3 husbands who die young, so one would be advised not to marry her. And some say after 2 husbands, but Abaye didn't hold by the rule of 2 husbands, so he married her, became her 3rd husband, and then he died. Now, he didn't die exactly young, but I don't know how long he was married to her. So at any rate, Rava's wife is like, escorted her out of town without a lot of love. So the Gemara relates a similar incident. The wife of Rav Yosef, the son of Rava, came before Rav Nehemiah, the son of Rav Yosef, for judgment. In other words, she was widowed and wanted her sustenance apportioned to her from the estate. She said, apportion sustenance for me. Rav Nehemiah apportioned a certain amount of sustenance for her. She said to him, apportion wine for me as well. And he apportioned wine for her. He said to her, I know that the residents of Mechoza are accustomed to drinking wine, and therefore you too are entitled to wine in accordance with the local custom. Similarly, the wife of Rav Yosef, the son of Rav Menashe of Deville, came before Rav Yosef. And she said to him, apportion sustenance for me. And he apportioned sustenance for her. And she added, apportion wine for me. He apportioned wine for her. She continued, apportion silk garments for me. Rav Yosef said to her, why do you need silk garments? She said to him, for you, for your friends, and for your friends' friends, meaning, even as a widow, I should not have to be ashamed in front of you and your colleagues. I was accustomed to dress a certain way when I was married, and I should be able to dress the same way now that I'm a widow. New topic. And let me just see something. Just double checking. Okay. New topic. The Mishna taught, and the husband is obligated to provide his wife with a bed, a soft mat, and a hard mat. So the Gemara asks, why does he need to give her a soft mat and a hard mat if she already has a bed? And Rav Papa said the Mishnah is speaking of a place where it is the custom to fill a bed with ropes. Because these ropes cause her suffering and age her, she covers them with a mat, which serves as a kind of mattress upon which she can lie in comfort. And so she's entitled to that. The sages taught, one does not give a poor woman a pillow and a cushion. In the name of Rabbi Nassan, they said, one does give her a pillow and a cushion. The Gemara asks, what are the circumstances? If it is her usual manner to use a pillow and a cushion, what is the reason for the opinion of the first Tana that she is not given these items? And if it is not her usual manner, what is the reason for the opinion of Rabbi Nassan? And the Gemara answers, no, it is necessary in a case where it is his manner to use a pillow and a cushion, but it is not her manner. The first Tana holds that the husband says to her, when I go away from you, I will take my bedding with me, and when I come back, I will bring it with me. And Rabbi Nassan holds that she can say to him, well, sometimes it happens that you arrive at twilight and you are unable to bring it with you, and you will take my bedding, and you will make me lie on the ground. Therefore, I require extra pillows and cushions. The Mishnah further taught. The Mishnah further taught, and he must give her a cap and shoes every festival, and clothes once a year. So Rav Papa said to Abaye, this Tana, with this statement that he gives her shoes 3 times a year and clothes once a year, creates a bizarre situation in which the woman is left naked but wearing shoes. As the husband must give his wife shoes 3 times a year, but new clothing only once a year. We're on 65b now. Abaye said to him, the Tana is standing, meaning speaking, of a mountainous region in which she cannot do without 3 pairs of shoes because the shoes wear out quickly in hilly areas. And in passing, the Tana of the Mishnah also teaches us that the husband should give them to her on a festival so that she will rejoice in them during the festival. The Mishnah also teaches, and the husband must give her clothes with a value of 50 dinars. Now, yesterday, when we read this Mishnah, I said, wow, that's an extraordinary amount of money, because we learned, right, that in this tractate that standard marriage settlement is 100 dinars for a widow who enters marriage and 200 dinars for a virgin who enters marriage. And that this large amount of money, which was the 200 dinars, is like a year's salary for an average man, was to, discourage him from just getting angry at her one day and divorcing her, since he has the unilateral right to a divorce. So the ketubah is to protect her, and that this amount of money, the minimum amount of money, is to protect her, so that it should be a large amount of money. So if 200 dinars is like a year's salary for the average person, how can you expect even the poorest Jew in Israel to spend 50 dinars on his wife's clothing year in and year out? It seems like a big allowance for clothing, a quarter of their whole income. But as we'll see, I was mistaken, because there are 2 kinds of dinars. And he must give her clothes with a value of 50 dinars. Abaye said this is referring to 50 simple dinars, peshite, which are used as the money of the state, and which are worth only 1/8 of the Tyrian silver dinars. From where did Abaye derive this? From the fact that it teaches, in what cases this statement said, it is with regard to the poorest of Jews. However, in the case of a prominent man, all the amounts are increased in accordance with his prominence. And if it enters your mind that the Mishnah means literally 50 silver dinars, from where would such a poor man get 50 silver dinars? He could not afford such a large sum for his wife's clothing every year. Rather, learn from this that the Mishnah is referring to 50 simple dinars. Now the Mishnah further states, and he may not give her new clothes in the summer, nor worn garments in the rainy season. And the leftover worn clothes belong to her. And the sages taught, leftover sustenance belongs to the husband, whereas leftover worn clothing belongs to the wife. And the Gemara asks, with regard to the statement that worn clothes belong to the wife, why does she need these old clothes? And Rechava said she requires them as she covers herself with them during her days of menstruation, so that she does not become repulsive to her husband. If she wears her normal clothes when she is menstruating, he will later be disgusted by her, I guess because the clothes would get stained. So Abaye said, we have a tradition that the leftover worn clothing of a widow belong to the husband's heirs. And the reason is that it is only in that case there, concerning a woman whose husband is alive, that the reasoning so that she does not become repulsive to her husband can be applied. Whereas here, when he is dead, let her become repulsive. There is no need to ensure that she find favor in the eyes of his heirs. I think that reasoning is a little suspect, but the law is that the leftover worn clothing of a widow belongs to the heirs. The Mishnah teaches, the husband has to give her a silver ma on I forget if it was a daily or weekly basis. And she eats with him from one Shabbos evening to the next. I think it's a daily silver ma. And she eats with him from one Shabbos evening to the next, meaning at least they must dine together every Shabbos night, every Friday night. Now the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the phrase she eats in this context? And Rav Nachman said it means literally that she eats with him once a week. Rav Ashi said what this actually means is that they have sexual relations on Friday night. The Mishnah states, and she eats with him from Shabbos evening to Shabbos evening. Granted, according to the one who says that this actually means eating, so this explanation is consistent with that which is taught, she eats. However, according to the one who says that it is referring to sexual relations, then what is the meaning of she eats? So the Gemara explains, it is a euphemism. As it is written, Proverbs 30 verse 20, so is the way of an adulterous woman. She eats and wipes her mouth and says, I have done no wickedness. So there, the Bible is employing a euphemism rather than speak in coarse language and talk about a woman having sex. It says that she eats and wipes her mouth, but what it means is she has sex with a man who is not her husband and, just cleans up and leaves and doesn't feel guilty about it. And that is, a wicked woman who's on her way to a bad place. The Gemara raises an objection. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, disagreeing with the Tan of the Mishnah, she eats on Shabbos evening and on Shabbos, meaning Friday night and Saturday day. So granted, according to the one who says that this actually means eating, this explanation is consistent with that which is taught, that she eats on Shabbos with her husband. However, according to the one who says that she eats is actually a euphemism for they have sex together, are there sexual relations on the day, during the daytime on Shabbos? But didn't Rav Huna say the Jewish people are holy, and therefore they do not engage in sexual relations during the day? And the Gemara answers that Rava said, if they are in a dark house, it is permitted to engage in relations even during the day. I am almost done, so if you have questions or comments, get them in. The Mishnah teaches, and if she is nursing, the required amount is reduced from her earnings and is added to the sum she receives for her sustenance. And Rabbi Ula the Great taught at the entrance to the house of the Nasi, although the sages said that a person is not obligated to sustain his sons and daughters when they are young, still, he must sustain the very young ones. And the Gemara asks, until when are they considered very young? Until the age of 6, in accordance with the opinion of Rav Asi. Because Rav Asi said a 6-year-old minor may go out by means of his mother's Erev. If she prepared an Erev on one side of the city, he, the 6-year-old or less, is included in his mother's Erev rather than that of his father, as he is considered subordinate to his mother. That would define how far he can walk on Shabbos, depending on where her Erev is, not where her father's is, if they have separate Erevim. So the Gemara asks, from where is this a law that Rabbi Ula taught derived? And the Gemara explains that it is derived from the fact that it teaches, if she is nursing, the required amount is reduced from her earnings and is added to the sum she receives for her sustenance. What is the reason for this? Is it not because the baby needs to eat together with her? This shows that a father is responsible to provide for his young child. And the Gemara rejects this proof. But perhaps he increases her sustenance not due to the baby, but because he has to take care of her, right? Provide extra sustenance for her while she is nursing, because while she's nursing, it's as if she's ill. She's not able to work, and she needs to eat more in order to keep up her health. So it's something that he owes her, not the child. And the Gemara retorts, if so, let the Mishnah teach if she was ill. What is the reason that it specifies if she was nursing? And the reason for the law must certainly be due to the child. And the Gemara again rejects this answer, but perhaps the Mishnah teaches us this, that in an ordinary situation, nursing women are like ill women, and therefore a husband must increase the sustenance all the more so if his wife is actually ill. And consequently, this does not prove that a father is obligated to sustain his very young child. And it was stated that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, wine is added for a nursing woman as wine is good for milk. And this is used as a proof that a husband has an obligation to support the children. Now, we saw earlier that this is a kind of legalese distinction because a husband is not technically obligated to sustain his children. It's like he sustains his wife and the wife sustains the children. But if a husband or if a father declines to support his children, the sages will shame him and humiliate him and announce that this is a man who refuses to support his children. They'll announce that publicly until he changes his behavior and starts supporting his children. And this concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 7 and chapter 5 here in Tractate Kesubos. Tomorrow night, Saturday night, with God's help, we'll continue with chapter 6, and in the Koran Talmud, we'll begin volume 2 of Tractate Kesubos. All right, let's see if we've got any questions that we can handle at this time on Kesubos Samechet, page 65. Molly Litvak asks, what if her husband is not accustomed to drinking wine? Why are we assuming only women can be unaccustomed to drinking wine? Great question. So it would appear that there's a few different factors that go into whether a husband has an obligation to provide wine for his wife. One is kind of this general warning, that women might become licentious if they drink wine because they're less accustomed to drinking wine than men are. But if she's accustomed to drinking wine, then we continue to give her wine because she can handle it. There's also this idea that we've seen, what kind of a family does she come from and what kind of a family does he come from? This is also pertains to the subject of, in what manner does he have to provide for her? If she comes from a wealthy family, she's not going to decline in socioeconomic status by marrying a man who's more poor, from a poorer family than she comes from. He has to sustain her like what she's accustomed to, where she comes from. However, if she marries up and marries a man from a wealthier family, then she's entitled to live like, his family is accustomed to live. So now your question is very good. If he is not accustomed to drinking wine and she is accustomed to drinking wine, what then is the law, right? Should he just provide for her in the way that he provides for himself? And then, wine is not going to be a part of it, at least like an ample amount of wine. I mean, they're still going to make kiddush, but maybe not more than that. Or because she's accustomed to it, even though he's not accustomed to it, maybe she should get the wine that she's accustomed to. We haven't encountered this problem, this dilemma, but I'm guessing that if she's accustomed to drink wine, he's going to have to provide that for her, even if he's not accustomed, but I'm not sure. So good question. Renee, so a woman not in the presence of her husband at, say, Passover, drank something other than wine? It's a great question. Are we talking here about, absolute rules that apply to women or people drinking wine all the time? Or are we saying this is the normal course of things, but everyone is obligated to drink 4 cups of wine at Passover, and I believe that is true, right? Everyone is obligated, not just the men. So I don't think we would extend this idea of how many cups she should or shouldn't drink, whether her husband is present or not, to what her obligation is at Passover. That's going to be a different question. But this general principle, and I would reverse it as well, right? That husband and wife, if the wine is going to make them more desirous then it's something they should do only when they are together, and not, when they risk that their eyes will stray, even if their behavior won't. Even the eyes straying is definitely not a good thing. So it's something they should do when they're together. And when they're not together, a taste here or there just to go with the food, but not allow themselves to become intoxicated. And finally, Ifa, in other places, the sages acknowledge the need for widowed and divorced women to groom themselves to attract a new husband. Why then can she be forced to become repulsive without her clothes? I'm 100% with you, right? So I guess it's like, what are they really saying here? Probably one of the distinctions that's being made, we saw this earlier, is when she becomes a widow, she is entitled to the ketubah payment, right? When she's a widow, she can get, let's say she entered the marriage as a virgin, so now she gets 200 dinars, and then she could do whatever she wants with that. And the concept is she's ready to get back out there and find a new husband. And certainly she's going to make herself as beautiful as possible in that process. On the other hand, if she's still longing for her husband and living in his house, she can decline to take the ketubah payment and just be sustained by his heirs. In that situation, they're not going to make it overly onerous for the heirs to provide for her. It's more like just providing her needs and no more, because really what she should be doing is getting on with her life, right? And we hope that the heirs are going to be understanding and loving, but if they're the children of another wife, and they're not, maybe they didn't have a good relationship with her, we can see how in the real world this might be difficult, and this might be sort of like a kind of policy that would encourage her to, take your ketubah payment, set up on your own, and go find yourself a husband. And don't be sort of moping around, in your dead husband's house, living as his widow indefinitely, when you could be getting on with your life and starting over and remarrying. Maybe. I'm just asking. I'm guessing there. And Molly has one more comment. Interesting answer. I wasn't thinking of family dynamics and backgrounds, but using the term accustomed in that way makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Well, thank you for being part of the class, Molly. It's great to have you here. Our daughter just started college this week. We miss her terribly, but having you in the class with us, what a mechaya, what a bracha, what a blessing. All right, my friends, that's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow night when Shabbos ends in LA, plus a little extra time to prepare. I'm hoping to be on the air by about 8:45 p.m. Pacific time. Have a great Shabbos.